Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're jumping right in today with a really crucial constitutional topic. It's all about the governor's role in signing off on legislative bills.
Right, and this whole debate has been supercharged by a recent Supreme Court advisory opinion.
An opinion sought by the president, correct, under Article 143.
Exactly. Article 143 is the mechanism that lets the president ask the Supreme Court for its take on a major question of law. And this one, well, it goes straight to the heart of how our federal system is supposed to work.
So we're talking specifically about Article 200.
We are. It's the part of the Constitution that lays out the governor's options when a bill from the state assembly lands on their desk. They can assent, they can withhold assent, or they can reserve the bill for the president.
And the court's opinion, what was the main takeaway? It seems like it really leaned into the idea of gubernatorial discretion.
It did, heavily. The court basically concluded that the governor has the discretion to choose between those three options. And, the most critical point is that the court said it cannot and will not impose a strict timeline for that decision.
So no deadlines. That feels like a major sticking point.
It is. The court did leave a small window open, saying it could intervene in, and I'm quoting here, glaring cases of inaction.
Which means?
It means if a delay is incredibly long and completely unexplained, the courts might step in. But by refusing to set a firm deadline, they've essentially kept the status quo, which, as we've seen, often leads to major friction between state governments and governors.
It's just so different from the historical context. I was struck by the reference in one of the articles to Walter Bagehot's 1865 analysis of the British monarch.
Oh, that's a brilliant point of contrast.
He said the Queen has no real veto. She has to sign her own death warrant if Parliament wants it. That's a purely ceremonial role.
And the Indian governor's role is clearly not just ceremonial. It functions as a powerful legislative choke point. And that brings us to the real conflict here, the principle of aid and advice.
The idea that the governor should act based on what the Council of Ministers advises?
Precisely. But this Supreme Court opinion seems to widen the governor's personal discretion, creating what some critics are calling gubernatorial governance.
Where an unelected official can effectively veto the work of an elected government just by sitting on a file.
That's the fear. The court justified this by looking back at the time before the anti-defection law, before 1985, suggesting a bill might pass without the government's full support. But that context is, frankly, obsolete now.
And constitutional scholars like B.N. Rao even foresaw these kinds of political messes.
He did. He posed scenarios, like what if a coalition passes a bill, then collapses, and a new government advises the governor to return it? It's messy. The current ruling gives the governor a lot of political room to maneuver in those situations.
Which feels risky, given how the governor's post has been used historically. Soli Sorabji's famous critique from 1985 comes to mind.
That it's a political consolation prize.
Or a stepping stone. So you politicize the appointment, then you grant this wide, unchecked discretion. It seems like a recipe for damaging union-state relations.
It really does. And that's why the article concludes that the only real fix is probably to amend Article 200 itself, to put clear, unambiguous timelines into the Constitution.
Because if the text is silent, the courts are always going to be hesitant to step in and write the law themselves.
Exactly. You can't have state policy held hostage indefinitely.
Okay, so if our governance structure is under strain, our next piece shows that public discourse itself is, well, collapsing. We're talking about extreme polarization.
Yes, and the article paints a really bleak picture. It argues that public debate has been reduced to a shouting match.
Driven by what it calls the profiteers of division.
Right. Political actors, digital platforms, anyone whose business model benefits from stoking our emotions. They thrive on conflict. So nuance and neutrality are actually bad for business. They're scorned, as the article puts it.
It feels like you're constantly being pushed to pick a side. You're either 100% with us or you're a traitor. There's no middle ground.
And if you even suggest compromise, you get attacked by both sides. The consequences of this are really damaging for democracy itself.
How so?
Well, you get legislative deadlock. Nobody wants to work together. And you see judicial autonomy being questioned. Courts are no longer seen as impartial, but as just another political faction.
And it's not just politics, right? The article talks about the personal and social costs.
Oh, absolutely. There's a documented rise in chronic stress and anxiety linked to this constant political hostility. Our social circles are shrinking as we kind of self-segregate along ideological lines.
Which can lead to things like workplace discrimination.
And even worse, an increase in hate crimes. because the other side isn't just someone you disagree with anymore. They're dehumanized. They're the enemy.
The paradox here is that we're more connected than ever through social media, but we seem more divided than ever.
That is the trap. Social media algorithms foster something called homophily.
Homophily. Let's pause on that.
It's just a technical term for our tendency to seek out and bond with people who already share our views. And at the same time, we repel or block out anyone with opposing views. These platforms create perfect echo chambers that just accelerate the polarization.
So if technology is part of the problem, what's the remedy?
The article argues we have to consciously reclaim genuine dialogue. We have to start defending neutrality as a moral position, not a weak one.
Which takes openness, humility.
Exactly. It quotes the philosopher J. Garfield on this. The goal has to be seeing your opponents not as enemies to be crushed, but as fellow human beings. The solution isn't to be silent, it's to choose the harder path of reasoned, respectful debate.
Let's shift from the polarization of public life to some very real gaps in education. We're looking at a growing divide in India's schools between literacy and numeracy.
This is a huge, often overlooked crisis. You see headlines from programs like the NIP Bharat mission that show progress in reading. And that's great.
But the math skills just aren't keeping pace.
Not at all. The ASAR 2024 data is incredibly stark. You have almost half of Class 5 students, 48.7% who can read fluently, but only 30.7% of those same students can solve a basic division problem.
That's an 18-point gap. That's massive.
It is. And it points to something fundamental about how math is learned. It's cumulative. It's hierarchical.
Meaning if you miss one step, you can't take the next one.
Precisely. If you don't truly understand place value, for example, then concepts like decimals become completely inaccessible. It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation.
And traditional teaching methods just make this worse.
They do. This rigid, syllabus-driven approach, where the teacher has to cover decimals in October, regardless of whether the kids understood fractions in September, just leaves most students behind. The gap just gets wider and wider every year.
The article also mentioned a disconnect between what students can do in the classroom and what they can do in the real world.
Yes, the JPAL study on this was fascinating. It showed that students who could pass a test at school often couldn't apply that same math to, say, make change at a market stall.
And the reverse was also true.
Right. Kids who were great at mental math in a real-world setting couldn't translate those skills to the abstract problems in a textbook. It's a huge disconnect. The end result is a massive failure rate in board exams and, tragically, a high dropout rate.
So what's the most urgent solution here?
The sources all agree. It's what they call an FLN plus extension.
Extending the foundational learning interventions past the early grades.
Exactly. Don't stop at Class 3. We need to take that approach. Teaching a child at their actual learning level, not their grade level, all the way up to Class 8.
Because the problem persists that high up.
Oh, yes. The data shows 70% of Class 5 students and over half of Class 8 students are still struggling with division. We've seen successful pilots of this in places like Dadra and Nagar Haveli. It works. The pedagogy just has to change from being syllabus-driven to being learning-driven.
Okay, now let's switch gears to an environmental threat that's literally under our feet. Road dust. A huge and often underestimated source of air pollution.
It's the primary source of coarse particulate matter, or PM10. These source apportionment studies, which are basically like a chemical fingerprint analysis of the air, show road dust can account for 20 to over 50% of PM10.
And it's not just dirt, is it?
No, not at all. It's a toxic mix of fine silt, bits of tire and brake pad, construction debris, all sorts of nasty stuff. And the scale of it, especially in North India, is just enormous.
The silt loads are naturally higher there.
Much higher. In Delhi, the average is over 14 grams per square meter of road. So there's always a huge amount of material ready to be kicked back up into the air.
And policymakers seem to recognize this, at least in terms of funding.
They do, and that's where the paradox comes in. The National Clean Air Program, NCAP, allocated a huge amount of money, nearly 20,000 crore rupees. And by late 2023, almost two-thirds of the money spent, 64%, went directly into road dust control.
That's more than for vehicles or biomass burning.
Way more. But here's the kicker. Despite all that money and focus, 29 of the cities actually reported an increase in their PM10 concentrations.
So the money's being spent, but it's not working. Why?
The article points to one core systemic barrier: fragmented jurisdiction.
The classic case of, it's not my job.
It's exactly that, but on a massive scale. Think about Delhi. There are 12 different agencies responsible for maintaining roads. The municipal corporation, the DDA, the NHEI, you name it. In Uttar Pradesh, it's 18 agencies.
With so many agencies, accountability just vanishes.
It completely diffuses. The funds get scattered, and there's no single body responsible for the outcome. So the dust just stays there.
And on top of that, there are operational gaps, like not having enough equipment.
Right. Delhi needs about 200 mechanized sweeping machines for its major roads. It only has 85. So even if the intention is good, the capacity just isn't there to tackle the physical scale of the problem.
The part that really got me was the mention of unscientific disposal.
It's almost absurd, isn't it? You go to all the trouble of sweeping the dust up with these expensive machines, and then you just dump it in a landfill or on the side of the road nearby,
Where the wind just picks it up and blows it right back into the air.
rendering the entire exercise pointless. The only way forward is to integrate science into the governance. You need a science-based regulatory body, clear guidelines for disposal, and, most importantly, a centralized GIS platform.
A single digital dashboard that forces all those 12 or 18 agencies to work together.
A single point of accountability. That's what it will take to clean up both the air and the bureaucratic mess.
Let's circle back to constitutional law now and get a bit deeper into the governor's assent issue we started with. This next piece really focuses on how the Supreme Court's latest opinion reversed a previous, more activist judgment.
Yes, and understanding this reversal is key to understanding the current judicial thinking. The new 5-judge bench opinion effectively tore up a ruling from a 2-judge bench in April 2025.
And that earlier ruling had been much more aggressive in trying to solve the delay problem.
It had. It tried to impose a 3-month timeline for governors to act. And even more radically, it suggested that the court could use Article 142 to declare deemed assent if a governor just refused to act.
Which would mean the bill becomes law automatically.
Correct. But the new opinion has shut that door completely.
It laid out 6 really clear points, didn't it?
Very clear and very restrictive. Just to recap them. 1, the governor keeps all 3 options. 2, it's their discretion. They are not bound by ministerial advice. 3, the function is non-justiciable, except for those glaring delays.
4, courts can't invent timelines. 5, you can't challenge the decision before the bill becomes law. And 6, the big one, Article 142, can't be used to create a deemed assent.
That 6th point is the most decisive rejection of judicial intervention. But I think the reinterpretation of the aid and advice principle is just as significant.
Right. How did they get around major precedents like the Shamshir Singh and Mbam Ribia cases?
Well, those cases were widely seen as cementing the governor's duty to act on the cabinet's advice. But the 5-judge bench carved out a special exception. They argued that actions under Article 200, the assent process, fall under the governor's discretionary powers and are separate from their normal executive functions.
It's a fine distinction, but a powerful one.
It's the legal justification that allows the governor to act independently of the state government on this specific legislative matter. And in doing so, they also ignored recommendations from bodies like the Punchy Commission.
Which had suggested a 6-month limit to smooth things over.
Exactly. But the court's stance is consistent. If the Constitution doesn't have a timeline, the judiciary won't create one.
So the biggest takeaway is the impact on federalism. The article warns this opinion could become an alibi for the governor's office to just block the policies of elected state governments.
It's a profound challenge. It really shifts the balance of power, giving a union-appointed official a tool to potentially frustrate the will of a state's electorate. That's the critical consequence.
Now, from a governance crisis to a public health tragedy, the malnutrition crisis in the Melghat region of Maharashtra, it's been going on for years, and the Bombay High Court recently slammed the government for its extremely casual approach.
This is a story of chronic systemic neglect, and the numbers are just horrific. You had 65 infant deaths in just a couple of months in 2025, nearly 100 in the year before that, and over 220 children are currently in the severe acute malnutrition category.
That's a complete system failure.
It is. And when confronted, the official response is often to deflect.
They argue it's not just malnutrition, but other underlying causes.
Right? They'll point to things like sickle cell disease, anemia, or delays in getting to a hospital because of bad roads. And while those things are absolutely factors, the petitioners argue that malnutrition is the core vulnerability that makes everything else lethal.
And the state's overall numbers are not good.
They're terrible. 35% of children under 5 in Maharashtra are stunted. Another 35% are underweight. Malnutrition isn't just a contributing factor, it's the fuel for this fire.
So what are the deep systemic failures that keep this crisis going?
It's a whole web of problems. You start with basic infrastructure, no proper roads, patchy electricity, not enough primary healthcare centers. But the biggest governance failure is that the departments all work in silos,
Health, tribal affairs, women and child development, all separate.
all working independently with no coordinated monitoring. And then there's the huge problem of actually getting doctors to work there and stay there. The absconding rate is incredibly high, which tells you everything you need to know about the conditions.
The article also mentions the intergenerational aspect of this.
Yes, and this is crucial. It's a devastating cycle. Malnourished young women become anemic, underweight mothers. They give birth to low birth weight babies who have compromised immune systems from day one.
So just handing out food packets isn't going to solve it.
Not even close. The experts say it requires a holistic approach. A functioning healthcare system, empowered ASHA workers, treatment for comorbidities, and deep community-level work to change behaviors and practices.
All right, let's lift our focus from that crisis and look upwards to in-flight internet. We all use it, but it's often so slow and frustrating. This next piece breaks down how it actually works.
The basic idea is pretty simple. The airplane itself acts like a giant flying Wi-Fi router. Your phone connects to an access point inside the cabin. That access point then uses one single long backhaul link to connect to the internet on the ground.
So my phone is never talking directly to a cell tower on the ground.
Never. The backhaul link does all the heavy lifting. And there are two main ways it does that. The first is called air-to-ground, or ATG.
Which is like a cellular network for planes.
Essentially, yes. There are towers on the ground with antennas pointed up. As the plane flies over, it hands off the connection from tower to tower, just like your phone does when you're driving. It works great over land.
But not over oceans.
Or deserts, or the poles. That's where the second system comes in, satellites. Historically, this meant using geostationary, or GEO, satellites.
Which are very, very high up.
Extremely high, about 35,000 kilometers, and that distance is the reason for that awful delay, the latency. Even at the speed of light, the round trip for the signal takes hundreds of milliseconds.
But that's changing now with low Earth orbit systems like Starlink.
Exactly. LEO satellites are much closer, only a few hundred to a couple of thousand kilometers up. This cuts the latency dramatically and offers a much faster, snappier connection. The trade-off is that the antenna on the plane has to be much more sophisticated to track these satellites as they race across the sky.
Okay, so even with better technology coming, why is the connection on most flights today still so much worse than my home internet?
It all comes down to shared capacity. That one backhaul link, no matter how good it is, has to be shared among everyone on the plane. 200, 300 people.
So the providers have to manage that bandwidth carefully.
They have to. They actively filter traffic. They'll block video streaming, or at least force it to a lower quality. They compress images. It's the only way to make sure everyone gets at least a basic, usable connection instead of one person hogging it all to watch a movie.
That brings us to the final question. Airplane mode. If the plane has all this sophisticated radio tech, why do we still have to turn our phones off?
It comes down to a regulatory preference for caution. The issue isn't Wi-Fi itself, it's the uncontrolled radio transmitters in hundreds of individual phones.
A phone trying to find a cell tower is shouting with its signal.
It's transmitting a very strong, unpredictable signal. And when you have 200 phones all doing that at once, it creates a messy, chaotic radio environment. While modern planes are incredibly well shielded, there's a theoretical risk that this noise could interfere with sensitive aviation frequencies.
So it's a better safe than sorry approach.
Pretty much. Plus, telecommunications rules actually forbid your phone from connecting to ground networks at cruising altitude. It confuses the whole system. The key is that the plane's own certified Wi-Fi system is tested and guaranteed to be safely isolated from critical flight systems. Your personal phone is not.
Let's turn to the business section now, starting with a really interesting debate in Norway over its wealth tax. It's a policy that goes way back to 1892.
It's a classic redistributive tax. It's applied at a pretty low rate, 1% on net wealth above a certain level, and it provides a steady stream of revenue. But some recent hikes and rule changes have triggered what some are calling an exodus of the wealthy.
And we're talking about a significant number of people leaving.
It went from a trickle to a stream, as one source put it. In 2022, 261 high-asset residents left the country. That's more than double the usual rate. The opposition has even created a wall of shame to publicize the names of entrepreneurs who've left.
But supporters still argue it's essential for equity, especially since Norway got rid of its inheritance tax.
Exactly. They see it as a necessary backstop.
Yeah.
And despite the high-profile departures, the revenue from the tax has actually gone up. It now accounts for 0.6% of GDP, which is not a trivial amount.
And there's an argument that it encourages certain types of investment.
Yes, some research suggests that because you have to pay the tax whether your assets are profitable or not, it encourages the wealthy to invest in things like human capital rather than just sitting on their wealth.
But the flip side is the argument that it hurts domestic businesses and entrepreneurs.
That's the main critique. It creates a real cash flow problem, especially for startup founders. They have to pay tax on the paper valuation of their company long before they see any actual profit. Critics say it makes it much harder for Norwegian companies to compete for capital globally.
It's that classic tension between social equity and economic competitiveness.
It is a debate that many countries are grappling with.
Our final deep dive today is about a supply chain crisis that should be a huge wake-up call for the global auto industry, the Nexperia chip crisis.
Yes, after all the focus on high-end chips during the pandemic, automakers completely missed the geopolitical risk attached to very low-tech, mundane components.
And what triggered this crisis?
It started when the Dutch government took control of a company called Nexperia because of concerns over its Chinese parent company. Beijing's response was swift and brutal. They halted all exports from Nexperia's main plant in Dongguan.
And the power of that move comes from how simple and essential these chips are.
That's the thing. They're described as very ordinary electronics. They sell for fractions of a penny each, but they are absolutely critical for everything from car brakes to electric windows. You can't build a modern car without them.
So the shortage had an immediate and massive impact.
Huge. Nissan and Honda had to cut production. Major suppliers like Bosch had to reduce factory hours. It was a stunning demonstration of China's dominance, not just in high-tech, but in the basic building blocks of industry.
There's a quote from an analyst that just summed it all up perfectly.
The Dutch thought they had seized Nexperia, but they only took over an office building. They depend on China. It perfectly captures the power dynamic. The intellectual property was in Europe, but the manufacturing choke point was in China.
And this whole crisis just blew up the just-in-time inventory model.
It completely exposed its vulnerability. Even huge players like Bosch, who buy hundreds of millions of euros worth of these chips, didn't have enough of a stockpile or alternative suppliers ready to go. They were left completely exposed.
And switching suppliers isn't a quick fix for these things, is it?
It's incredibly difficult and expensive. These chips are soldered onto circuit boards deep inside larger components. To switch to a new chip, you have to do months, sometimes up to a year, of retesting and recertification.
Which is a stark contrast to a company like Toyota.
Right. After the 2011 earthquake, Toyota learned its lesson. It now mandates that its suppliers keep several months' worth of chips in reserve. It's a buffer against shocks.
So the final lesson for the industry is this choice between cost and resilience.
That's it. For decades, the industry optimized for the lowest possible cost. Now they're facing the reality that geopolitical resilience is expensive, but the cost of not having it can be even higher.
It's a fundamental question. How much are companies willing to pay for insurance against a world where political control is becoming more important than global efficiency? That tension is going to define manufacturing for years to come. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.